Welcome everyone to my YouTube channel, Truth in Motion Studios, and today I get to meet Peter Helms, and you get to meet him through me. Peter Helms,
Hi.
hello, hi, you are in Germany where it is 5 p.m. right now.
Correct.
Yes, and a beautiful sunny day, and I'm here in Minnesota where it's just after 10 in the morning. Why are we even meeting? So, our topic today is missionary work and spiritual abuse or healing from our time in missionary work. My personal relationship to missionary work is I've come to realize that I've always been a missionary. I was raised a Baptist kid and our pastor was quite evangelistic, and so I've always been out there in my school, wherever I was, talking about Jesus, talking about the sinner's prayer, and whatever I heard in church, I was repeating to people, believing I needed to do that to save them from sure hell. So then I joined this group, which I now consider a cult, in my early 20s. And the main leader was affiliated to YWAM only in the way that he was there for a while, a season in his youth. And when I came out of that group, one of the first things I felt was I felt like a complete failure, a failure to God, that whatever God was expecting of me, I was not able to deliver on that. I was becoming curious as to what my cult leader may have had in his background experience-wise. And so I started to look into YWAM and found a Facebook group that was called Spiritual Abuse in YWAM. And joining the group, listening to people asking questions, I realized that there are a lot of similarities, just what they were describing regular life looked like, but also what my life in my cult looked like. And it was virtually the same thing. And so our video is not about tearing down YWAM or calling them all evil. This is more about facing what has happened to me and also Peter's experiences with YWAM, and just let's talk about it. You know, that's the first step of getting anywhere toward healing. Let's talk about it. Let's see what the truth is, and then we can maybe go further and find healing, hopefully. So how did I meet Peter? Peter and I have the same acquaintances, it seems like. Brad Jerzak dedicated one of his latest books, there's even a new one yet, but the one that was at the time, Incarnation and Inclusion. That is a passion work for Brad Jerzak and an expression of his theology that I believe that's just beautiful with theology. But then another lady from the Netherlands contacted me, and she said that she knew a Peter Helms in Germany. And so I started to think, I think I have to contact Peter Helms. And then I saw on your Facebook page that you were working at YWAM, you were a teacher there. And so it came all together, and I contacted you, and we've talked ever since, and I found your responses, your posture, so kind and wise that I felt it would make for a very good conversation that we could record about everything I just mentioned. So thank you so much, Peter, for taking the time today.
You're very welcome.
My first question to you is, how did you find your way into missionary work? And you can take as much time or go way back, whatever we need to know to see what has happened there. How did you end up in missionary work?
Well, to be quite honest, I really didn't even know that it was missionary work. But see, the thing is that I have not always been a quote-unquote Christian, and that is debatable as to what that really means. But I was a performer, an actor and a singer in the musical Hair, and that's where I actually came to know Jesus through meeting some lovely, very unassuming two ladies from Switzerland. It was in Basel that this all happened. And they told me about Jesus, and they invited me to have a meal with them. and together with a friend, because I was a little bit too afraid to go all by myself. You never know what two Swiss ladies will do to a hippie young man like I was at that time. And so I went there and found myself in the most amazing situation, in the sense that it was just a table that we were at, cheese fondue that we ate. And here were Heidi and Helga, that were their names, and Marcus, my friend, and myself around the table. And they talked about Jesus that as their best friend. And I was raised being a Catholic, and I realized that, wow, what they have is something very, very special. And that day I was not high on drugs or had not taken anything. So it was already 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So that was quite something, because usually I would be high every day. And so as they talked about Jesus, and then they asked what we believed in, and then we shared what we thought we believed in. And then towards the end of the afternoon, just prior to have to go and return to the theater so that I could actually do another performance in the musical Hair, they said, why don't we pray together? So we did. And I had never done that. Being a Catholic, of course, I knew about prayer a little bit, but more within the realm of church, and not so much personal. But here, these two ladies, they started to talk with God in such a personable and such a real way that I was quite amazed. And then I found myself, because I just felt like, hey, there's someone more in this room than just me and just the four of us. And I just, before I knew what I did, actually, I found myself saying, Jesus, if this is you, come in my life and change me. And that particular moment changed my life. It was like some kind of a hot fluid came right down into my soul. I felt like I had my birthday. I was so overjoyous I could jump up and dance and sing all at the same time. Wanted to hug those ladies, and yeah, I felt so overjoyed. And then they told me, Peter, now you have become a Christian. My friend, by the way, had a similar experience. It was all very spontaneous. Nothing was forced. Nothing was put on us or anything like that. It was very open, very spontaneous, very real. So that very same evening, we went back to the show, and that evening on stage, I actually shared on stage in front of all the people, that were about 800 people there in the theater, what happened to me that afternoon. I did this a few more times, and then they kicked me out of the show. That was the end of that. And then I discovered, I mean, the question for me is, okay, what now? What are we going to do? Where are we going to go? And it was my friend and I, and a couple of days later, 3 others joined us. And then Salvation Army actually picked us up, so to say. They opened their doors to us, and we went there, and we found a place where we could crash, where we could stay. And they were very nice and very loving to us. And then they also connected us with people who were connected with YWAM at that time as well. Now we're talking 1972, so that's very many moons ago. And I was still a young man. I still consider myself young, but hey, you can be in an illusion, right? So, but hey, that's how I found YWAM. That's how I discovered YWAM. And I went there, and it was the first school that they had in Germany ever. They had already started in Lausanne in Switzerland, but that was their first school in Germany. And so I joined that. And I must say that's my first experience. I had no clue of what was missions, what was church, I didn't know anything but the Roman Catholic Church as such. And so to me, this was like a group of people that obviously were in love with the same Jesus that I had met. And it was a lovely group of people, international, which I really loved very much as well. And so that's my entry point into YWAM. And altogether, I've been in YWAM for, I think, more than 25 years, something like that. And yeah, I think so, about 22, 23 years, actually. And so and then after that, I still connected with YWAM in different occasions, different places, different countries. And I became one of the quote unquote teachers. So that's been my YWAM experience. And it's been both good. And there's been also some question marks, definitely, that I had afterwards, and not just afterwards, but even during, where I wondered about, okay, what about this and what about that? One of the things that already at an early time I wondered about very much was the whole question of authority and how authority was looked at that particular point. Now, of course, the scripture that went with that was always, "You shall not touch God's anointed." And so I always wondered about that. Now, in the beginning, of course, being a very young Christian, I didn't question much. I went with the flow. I was impressed with what, God was doing amongst us, and saw many different countries, met, most of at those times, in those days, the prominent leaders like Lauren Cunningham, Don Stevens, Keith Warrington, a lot of people that I came to know personally, and some more than others, of course. And yeah, that's basically been my experience as such. Now, I'm sure you have a lot of questions, so go ahead, Christina, please.
So you started out in YWAM Germany as doing your DTS?
No, it wasn't called the DTS yet. It was called the School of Evangelism.
Okay, which seems like the natural step you take after you have your conversion. You learn how to pass that on to other people.
That's correct, yes.
How did you first experience that authority? You mentioned that there was a question that you had fairly quickly. How did that play out?
For me, it was like, especially when a bit later, actually, I found myself in South Korea, and first in Japan, and that's where the very, very important milestone conference was being held, leadership conference for all those that were in leadership. And one of the teachers there was Joy Dawson, and Joy Dawson, quite an amazing woman, but also very outspoken in many ways, and very strong on the point of hearing God's voice. And she taught that, and that was really, really good. But one of the things that really that I wasn't quite sure what to do with was the whole question about for example, she taught us how to do intercession, and there were 10 steps of intercession. And the first step was, make sure your heart is clean before God. So make sure there is no sin in your heart. That was it, basically. And I always wondered about that, because I thought, the way to come into God's presence is not to make sure you have no sin in your heart, but the way I found that in Psalm 100, for example, it says, come before him with thanksgiving. And that's a whole different approach. And when Jesus teaches us to pray, our Father, he doesn't start with sin, but he actually starts with being part of the family, being included in who the Father is. And so to me, that was very strange. And soon I found and discovered that there was a real emphasis on sin in YWAM. And that came through the whole teaching, I think, of moral government that was taught by Gordon C. Olson. Also a wonderful man, but very much how would you call that? Very much into holiness, very much into piety, very much into Charles Finney, very much into the holiness movement, if you will. which was, of course, also part of some of the roots in YWAM, Pentecostal and holiness. Um, and that's where the emphasis came of sin. And but also it carried with the authority thing. So interestingly enough, this is how it was with me. It was like I was at that conference where only leaders were, and I was not even a Christian for a year, so I really hardly knew anything. I had done the SOE, or maybe a bit longer than a year, but I had done the SOE, and then found myself on an outreach to South Korea, and then ended up in Japan. And then as I was in Japan, I during a conference, there was this thing that was going on that basically the leadership said, there's someone here with sin in their life, and unless you repent of it, it's going to be bad. Something towards that effect. And of course, you need to understand the whole context of that. And I don't think it was evil meant or anything like that. But me being a very young Christian, and there was about 100 people there, most of them very experienced Christians, leaders, those that are already in leadership. And there was nobody who stood up. So I felt so much under pressure that I felt I needed to stand. Now, luckily enough, Lauren Cunningham looked at me and he said, "Peter, it's not you, sit down." So I was immensely relieved, and talked later on with Lauren, and he assured me that, and because I was willing to confess anything and everything, um, uh, because I found relationship is so important. I don't want to break any relationship, and so there was, of course, an element of fear there as well, and that came through the teaching. Hours of teaching of Joy Dawson that was very much on the holiness of God and how to be clean, this, that, and the other. So that was a bit of an interesting experience. And then I was stuck in Japan, couldn't go anywhere. I was stuck on the base. I didn't have any money anymore. Then somebody gave me some money. I found myself on a boat to South Korea. That's all the money I had. I could go as far as South Korea. I had to go there because I had no visa anymore for Japan. So here I was on the boat to Korea, and I met a missionary from Sweden, and I talked with him. I think it was in a Korean bath on that. I mean, we all go naked and you basically have a bath. And so I talked with this Korean missionary who just happened to look for missionaries like us, because I wasn't the only one, two others as well. And so I thought, oh man, this is awesome. This is great. So we went with him, had a place to stay, but this was not YWAM. This was totally outside of YWAM. Now, a month or two later, I mean, you listen, I was in that missionary compound from the Swedish missionary. I had a room that was about, I don't know, it had an own bath. It was a huge room. It was beautiful. And the missionary and his wife, they were very, very kind and very nice. And they talked about the love of God. And then one day there was this knock on the door, and here was a YWAM leader that basically demanded me to come back to the YWAM center in Korea. And I said no. And then the Korean or the Swedish missionary, he took over from me, and he basically talked with this guy from YWAM and basically told him he's not going to go anywhere. He's going to stay with us here. So I was free of YWAM right there. But that's my first taste of leadership that I think was abusive, where they basically felt they had a right on me somehow. And that, okay, anyway, to make a long story short, I stayed there for 2 years, and went back to the Netherlands. Ended up with Floyd McClung from Dillaram Houses, who was a former YWAM leader. and worked amongst hippies in Amsterdam for a while. Of course, Amsterdam is my home city. Stayed within a community there. And I think that community of people was not affiliated with YWAM at the moment that I stayed with them, but then later on became affiliated with YWAM. But I found that that community had a bit more health to it. Floyd was a very good leader. He had good people around him, and very open to very good people. It wasn't typically charismatic. It was a far more a thinking community. And so I felt very much at home there. And that's how I then stayed for another couple of years there, got married. And then that particular ministry from Floyd reintegrated with YWAM again. And so that's how I got back into YWAM again. And where I became part of a DTS, actually redid a DTS. And then, and yeah, what I found there, what I found really interesting there is for me, is again, the emphasis on sin, the emphasis on formulas, meaning like, how do you hear the voice of God? Well, you have to go through 10 steps basically. And all of that, I discovered later, this is so not on. And anyway, I ended up leading my own YWAM base, also in the Netherlands. But the interesting thing is, even YWAM at that time could not hold me in a box. That was very difficult for YWAM. I always seemed to jump out of the box. Always, because I mean, at that moment, I was very much involved with street drama and doing dramas and teaching people dramas. I got more and more involved with other churches outside of YWAM in the Netherlands, but also in other countries. My heart was far bigger than what the YWAM bases then at that moment were. I would say YWAM in itself has a big, big heart. They're very international, of course. But also through that, I got to know a lot of other YWAM bases because I became more and more involved in teaching, and they started to invite me. First doing, teaching drama there, and then later on teaching on the gifts of the Holy Spirit and the prophetic and all that kind of thing. And I discovered a lot of good YWAM bases. At the same time, I also discovered YWAM bases that I thought, oh my goodness. And often, and to be quite honest, the message that I started to give was not always accepted very well either, because it was out of the box, was far more, leaning towards grace, and would be interpreted easily towards being liberal. And so that was a bit of a difficulty. And I started to realize, wait a minute, these, every base have their own particular taste and their own particular DNA almost. And at that time that was, at least. And it was very much depending on how healthy the leadership was, is how healthy the base would be. And of course, you find people being, far too into YWAM, so to say, and basically having nothing else outside of that. And I think that's one of the major pitfalls of community living like that and missionary organizations like that.
Yeah. That is a very good segue into speaking very concrete experiences. What you were explaining with the broader brush, this idea that leadership can speak to individuals and say, God told me there's sin in your life. And if you don't receive that, if you don't accept that, and if you don't get rid of it, then something bad is going to happen. Even your eternal salvation may be at stake. And think of all the people that won't get saved because you are lukewarm or whatever it is. So let's dwell for a moment on what that does with a soul, with a mental health of a person.
Yeah, yeah.
What
I
would
think,
you?
yeah, I think that, Christina, I think what the problem is there is first of all, I think the problem is twofold. One is leadership. Mature leadership um, gives room, and I think sound and healthy theology will help us to love God more from our hearts and become more human.
Mm,
Well, if you have leadership that is immature and leadership that is very much needing to prove itself or prove themselves for whatever reason, leadership that needs to somehow make a statement, and then I think you already have a problem right there. And then, of course, abuses like people telling other people what to do because God told me so, that's the worst possible scenario you can think, because that means control. And I think, again, control happens when there is a lot of insecurity, and control can happen when people don't feel loved somehow, and they need to derive that love from either being controlled or control. So I think it happens in both ways. Of course, for young Christians, I think a setting like that can be detrimental and can be very, very hurting and harmful. And again, where the emphasis is very much um, on how bad we are, then I think that's one of the ways to control people. Because let's say I'm a leader and I can tell you how bad you are because you don't know as much as I do. And so that gives me a leeway over you. So that can give me the possibility to control you. But now, if you are not mature and not yet, you don't understand everything, and like many young Christians don't, they fall into that trap and they allow others to, people who are above them, to kind of take that place in their lives. And what that does is actually takes the place of God, really. And so the ability to actually hear God for yourself is being taken away. So, however, this is another point, I think, a problem that I think YWAM, and I think not just YWAM, but I think any Christian church organization or whatever it is has. And that is when they begin to tell you that mankind is at the core unrighteous, sinful, bad from the core. When that is the case, there you already have a major reason for control. Because then you get already the differences between those who are really bad and those who are spiritual. And so those who are spiritually obviously have a possibility of being far better, and they hear God, and they have found a key to be so spiritual. So you who are being told that you are so bad and that you are at the core really sinful, then they already have a leverage on you. So this is where the problem comes in. And this is a theology that is very, very sick. And I think, it plays into the basic feelings of our own problems that we have. And that is something that I think we need to be healed of.
Yeah. Yeah, I would imagine that at this point we would shock a few of our listeners, because what you just said, it sounds to the person that was raised in Calvinism, in Protestant theology, to them it sounds unbiblical. It sounds like heresy. I have
Yeah,
studied theology, and I have also moved in the direction that you're describing. Um, God has become so much bigger and better, and humans as creation of God have become, in my mind, very good. And so
yeah,
I feel like I can now pick up so much quicker when people want to use that any kind of control in that sense, trying to tell me, well, but you haven't thought of that, right? Or have you repented of this? And it's so quickly going from that core, which you have described, that at the end of the day, is that your wife?
Yeah, my wife asked, because Bubbles, our dog, is out there. We just need to make sure that we don't lose him, because he's the sweetest dog.
Yeah, we don't want to lose Bubbles.
Bubbles, I mean, can you believe it? It's, the idea is it's never-ending joy. Bubbles.
Bubbles, never ending joy. Wonderful.
Yeah, please. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry for this very, very light interruption
No worries. No worries.
into a theological situation.
Yes. Yeah, no, what I'm trying to get at is very simply that when I came out of my missionary group that I then was eventually able to call a cult, I went through all these layers of healing, of realizing what had happened. So that's how my brain works. I don't just move on and don't look back. I think about it, I analyze it, I want to understand what happened. And one of the first layers that I realized was, wow, that was spiritual abuse.
Yeah.
And then later came the realization, the faith that was portrayed in itself is abusive to the mental health. And that's hard to believe, that God would create a world that in itself makes people go bonkers because they have to save all the others, or consider them as part of the not elect. And so now you don't have to worry about them. They just get what they have coming. Neither gets you to a place of freedom and love. Both is very legalistic and judgmental. And so, for me, for sure, I came to the realization too, there's something very wrong there, but not everybody is there. And so we don't want to lose our audience that is still in that place. But we can just invite them to keep an open heart and see what. Well, how would you address that, Peter?
Yeah, I think the way we see God determines very much the life we live. And so in biblical terms, it would be whatever we worship is what we become like. And worship not meaning singing songs for or about, because that's not what worship is all about, but really attributing value to. So whatever we attribute value to, whatever we find very valuable, so valuable that we actually would, give our lives towards that particular, whatever it is. And so that's what we become like. That's what we will start to look like. That's how we start to live like. And so I think that the first point to address also in healing is in healing our, the deep-seated wounds of abuse, of spiritual abuse, is to actually rediscover who God really is, and to ask some real difficult questions. And that may take years, because it's not easy. My own children have gone through some real difficult times, especially my oldest son, and still is going through a difficult time, simply, and not just due to YWAM, but I think due to any spiritual abuse through all kinds of different streams in Christianity. I think, again, the emphasis on sin, the emphasis on how bad we are, the emphasis on guilt, the emphasis on how bad we are, really. That emphasis in itself is so devastating to any good emotional health. So my own children, especially my oldest son, he is rediscovering again who he is, because in the process of this spiritual abuse, and once again, it's not been only YWAM, but it's been many other different streams. In that process, you're losing total connection with who you are. And the interesting thing is that I think that true spirituality, somebody asked me, Peter, what is true spirituality? I think it was Brett who asked me that.
Yeah, Brad Jerzak, yeah.
Yeah, it was a rhetorical question, I think. But I said, true spirituality, Brad, is becoming truly human again.
Mm.
Being who you really are. That's true spirituality. And I cannot stand anything that people call spirituality. And to me, is so out of this world. So like, that's not spirituality. This is nothing. This is not even real. This is not human. It is not humane. It is whatever it is, but it's not being human. And being human, being fully alive as a human, means that you truly can enjoy being who you are, being at peace with yourself, being at peace um, with creation, being at peace with what this day holds. Um, that there is a point of once you start to discover that, I think that's where true spirituality is to be found. And of course, that is in the picture that we have of God, because God is not so spiritual. God is, for one, God became human, right? And never ceased ever to be human. Um, Jesus is still human. He is the first of all truly humans in that sense. And so I think if we start to discover God, who he really is, and discover what he is really like, the effect it will have is that we become more human.
Yeah, that's very, very beautiful. And maybe the answer to the question I want to ask you now, but I do want you to speak to people who have this universal experience, not just from YWAM, but certainly also there. That's a topic in the group again and again, which I've experienced too. You leave, your time is over, or you have left because you couldn't handle it anymore, you couldn't bear it, there was something that happened, you were kicked out, and now you feel like such a failure. Like you're worth nothing because you couldn't even do this thing for God. You couldn't even spread the love, spread the faith. Couldn't even do that. What do you say to people that are right in that mindset?
First of all, I would say relax. That sounds cheap, but relax, meaning that we were never meant to work for God, never ever.
Wow.
And God never asked us that, ever.
So what about go and make disciples of every nation?
No. That is a misinterpreted understanding.
Okay.
Because I think true discipleship is not trying to make somebody else like you or anything like that. But true discipleship is basically being who you are, and then your example influences people. And your example of being a human being who's kind, who's loving, who's faithful, who's true, who's real. Those elements are, and those characteristics, that's what it is about. And so, yeah, you don't have to make disciples, you don't have to make converts. Never ever does it ever say in the Bible or in scriptures as such that we have to save people. Jesus did all that. And what we got to do is basically, or what we've got to be, is actually be. And by being who we are, people will ask, hey, what is it that makes you so kind? Or that make what did you take? What did you drink? I want that.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, that's how our lives should speak. And it should be on a human level, not because we have incredible euphoric experiences of, the seventh heaven, eighth heaven, ninth heaven, 10th heaven, whatever it is, all that bullshit. It's just like, hey, forget it. let's just stay here on earth. And do you enjoy a good meal? Do you enjoy a good glass of wine? Do you do you enjoy life? Can you enjoy it? Can you actually enjoy yourself? Are you, this is part of it. So it is not about trying to make converts. I don't know where we got that from. That is something that the revival history has brought us, and I think it is misguided. It is misguided to a big extent. Um, I don't think that Jesus ever meant us to be that way. I think our lives are to speak for themselves, and then when people see something in that, then they will want that what we have discovered also. And then there is a reason to talk. There might be a reason to share. There might be a reason just to have people come over for a good meal. That's how I found and discovered Christ myself, by and through a real good cheese fondue meal. It wasn't great theology that these people had. They were very normal people, and it wasn't because they were so charismatic. They were not. They were very normal people. But something really inspired me, and their lives inspired me so much that through them I met Christ. I had a real meeting with Jesus, and that made all the difference to me.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that is very, very good. Um, what do you say about a system where you can climb the ladder by raising money for yourself and giving them the money, and then getting titles, getting some kinds of degrees that are worth a lot within the system that it was created, but outside of that system are completely useless. They may be considered experience in the field or something, but to any other employer, this is nothing because it's not a real accredited degree. What do you say to that scenario?
I think, yeah, that's one of the major pitfalls of organizations like YWAM. And that is that people go into that particular organization. Bethel is another one. Any very charismatic, any very alive situation where a lot of people find as a common denominator, and where a lot of people have the same type of experience. What happens there in that euphoria, I believe, is that people get hooked into that. They get almost like they are, yeah, how would you say that? It's like taking a drug, and it's like you have to have it, and outside of that you can't function. It's like a codependent relationship, and I think there is a real danger of having a codependent relationship in organizations like Bethel, like YWAM, like any of these groups, communities, and I think the way to deal with that is to broaden your horizon, and to experience more, because there is so much more, and you're capable of so much more. And so I would say, you know, discover what is outside of that particular small little circle that you think is the world, which it is not.
Yeah.
It's only a very small sliver of the world. And even though they say we are standing on God's edge, we are standing on the edge of revival, and we are the guys who've got it, and we are the ones who are going to change this world. We're going to break through the spiritual heavens in order to see a breakthrough of revival coming here and there, whatever. All of that is not true. I don't believe that that is true for one point. I think what is true is the fact that your life makes a difference in the sense that of who you truly are. So discover who you are. Discover outside of the parameters in which you find yourself imprisoned. And the way to actually find that, and the way to actually discover that is, can you imagine yourself being a life outside of the parameters of whatever you're stuck into. And if you're out of those parameters and you find yourself feeling like a failure, feeling like you've just totally missed it, you've missed God, you've missed everything, then okay, accept that. Accept the fact that you feel like that. Those feelings may not necessarily be true because you've not missed God and you've not failed him for sure, but just accept the feelings that they are there and they are real, and it's going to take time to rediscover what life really is all about and rediscover what you and who you are all about. It's going to take time, and you might need to go to a professional counselor, to a professional, and maybe not even a Christian one, but just a person that can help you further. And there are plenty, even Christian ones, that are down to earth and will not come with a lot of platitudes that won't help you any further. But there are plenty of people that have good counsel, that can give you good counsel in your particular predicament which you find yourself in now. So I would say, make sure that you discover the world that is outside of wherever you found yourself stuck in, and maybe the reason why you got yourself unstuck. And that unstuckness feeling is not gonna leave quickly. It's gonna take time. You're gonna grieve, because you're gonna grieve loss of what you feel that you've lost. But at the same time, you will also discover life again, where you come alive, where you as a person become alive, where you discover where you can actually be more human.
Yeah. So much good counsel right there. Very, very good. I want to reiterate that you earlier said God does not need us to work for him. That's so good. So good. God does not need us to work for him. And Jesus did the saving.
Yeah.
Jesus did.
Exactly.
And,
yeah. He said, I just I finished a little video series in German about abiding in him, meaning the whole idea of us being him being the vine and we being the whatever it's the Reben, whatever is there. The twig. Yeah, whatever. John 14:16.
Yeah.
And where it, and one of the things that it says is that, hey, stay in me as I am in you.
Yeah.
And there will be a day where you will discover that you are actually in me. That's what Jesus says. Even if you haven't discovered it, you have always been in me, always. And this is the good news for the entire human race. It's like, hey, there will be a day where everyone will realize, wow, I was in Christ and Christ was in me. And maybe I've never even realized it, but now I do. Yes. And that's good news.
Yeah.
That's good news.
Yes.
And I think I see myself, when I take it personally, I see myself as being one of those that help others basically see that by living the life that I live in a way that is not without trouble, without difficulty, without my ups and my downs, not without suffering, not without things going bad, but just living life the way it is.
Yeah.
And hopefully that will awaken something in someone else. And I hope that it would awaken is the life of Christ that is within everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nothing was created outside of him. Without him, there's nothing. Yes. Why can't we quote those Bible verses a little bit more often? I really want to take more time and hear more of your thoughts on difficult things that are being perpetrated in, for instance, YWAM, but certainly all over evangelicalism. This one comes to mind of giving up all your rights, and not just like giving it up like a surrender, more coming to terms with the fact that you literally don't have any rights. So it's more coming down to this idea of you think you have rights, but you don't. So this is part of the brainwashing that many experience in YWAM, that I have severely experienced in my 3 years with my group. And then once you think that's a good idea, I should really give up my rights. I guess they're right. I need to not think that I can expect to be treated fairly or humanely, or that my personal choices matter. All of these, if you move in that direction, well, obviously you're free for all at that point. I mean, you're just there for the abusing, because anything goes at that point. You won't speak up for yourself anymore. You just die to yourself. Literally die to yourself. And that is supposedly the thing that Jesus was asking from us, that we have to die to ourselves in order to find life.
Yeah.
What do you say to people that really suffer now because that's what they were told and they swallowed that for a while?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think that whole giving up your rights is a real issue for abuse, and I think it can be used as a matter of control. And again, I think it is a wrong picture of who God is, that we are being taught, or that we have been taught. And this definitely, this would take another hour to answer.
Good. Okay.
Because I've thought of this question quite a bit, and I think that's one of the, that's the same thing as you have to be sinless, or you have to absolutely have your heart needs to be pure in order before you can come to God. That's one of those fallacies and really bad theologies. And the same thing is with, if you don't understand what it means that you have to give up your right, what does that mean? And I think we could look at that at another time, definitely.
Yeah. I made a 5-minute vlog, my shortest vlog ever, where I dug in my backyard and I found a seedling of an oak tree that was an acorn, and it had opened. So it was a seed that fell into the ground, maybe got put there by squirrels and forgotten, and so it had time to germinate. And so basically that's it. It fell into the ground and it died. But here's the thing, the dying part actually means it's gonna produce a tree. Like, it fell from a tree, it's tiny, now it's doing its thing in the right condition, water and moisture, the cool, and here comes life. So my change of thinking is, wow, this is not death, it's maybe a transformation where your potential gets unlocked. I don't know if it hurts the acorn when the shell cracks, I don't know, but it certainly is life looking at that. But tell me more, what you're thinking.
Well, I think what you're saying is right on. It's you see, I think that giving up our rights is not so much like it. Another word for that is dying to self, and that's an interesting. Those are interesting concepts in itself. I think the concept in itself, if rightly understood, could be helpful, but oftentimes they're not right understood. I think in a society in which we live, where everything is about me and everything is, about having your right, having my right, and I have a right to this and I have a right to that. That is the other side of the spectrum, and I think that's not healthy either. That's not going to help. It is very obvious that agape love, or the love that Jesus has, is a self sacrificing love. It's a love that gives of itself. Obviously, that means that he gave of himself and still does. It's it is a whole different idea of what secularized society has, where everything has to be focused on me. Um, it is the kingdom, I think, in that sense, is a whole different understanding there. Um, so if you don't understand that, if you don't get who God is in his fullness, the Trinity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, the dance of the three, the dance of the Trinity, the fact that they constantly give towards each other. They're constantly preferring the other above yourself. And in doing so, there is an incredible flow of life. But that's all. And if you would say that is giving up your rights, yeah, then I would say absolutely. But giving up your rights in saying, okay, I've got a right to privacy, or I've got a right to this, or I've got a right, and you've got to now give that up, or I got a right. I don't think that's what is meant. But for people who are immature in leadership, they will interpret it that way and then seek to control the others. And I think that's the problem. And again, when we are trying to give up rights in order to be accepted, then we also have not understood who God really is. Because the only way to do that is hey, I'm in love with my wife. Okay, I've been married for 43 years now, and it's a constant dance with each other. It's a dance. It's a give and take. It's a give and take, and you love the other, and of course that costs. I've got 3 kids. It costs to have them part of me, and for me to be part of them. It's like a dance, and it's not just me anymore. It's the other as well. So we've got to find how that is, and that's what it's all about. I think a life with God is a dance with God. It's like learning how to dance with Him, and how to dance with love, and what that looks like. That's a big thing.
Yes, beautiful vision for life to have. I hear the church bells ringing, so obviously you're in Germany, and also we said we wanted to keep it around an hour because you have
Yes,
a cooking class to put on.
yes. Having people enjoy food.
Yes, what a way! I mean,
It's so
isn't
much
that
fun.
the
We
thing?
do that, and Marie and I, we just love doing that.
Yeah,
And especially she loves doing that. So what she's all worked it out. We're going to do South African cooking. So we're going to teach them how to make babuti. We're going to teach them how to make potbrood, and has nothing to do with pot, by the way. We're going to teach them how to uh, make malva pudding.
wow.
It's absolutely wonderful. And then, of course, they've got to eat what they made.
Yeah, yeah. What a way to experience the world.
Uh,
Beautiful. You get to facilitate that. What a ministry. So my last
yeah.
question for you then is about when people ask, as adults, as parents, should I let my kid go to YWAM? They're old enough, they're raising the money. Should I say, no, don't do that? What should I say to them?
I would be very cautious in the sense of make sure that, because like every YWAM base is different. I haven't taught, like for example, I've taught last February, I taught at YWAM base in South Africa in Worcester. I know the people there, and the schools that they have, the teaching that they have is really, really, I think is really healthy and is really good. So in that sense, I would recommend a person to go to that particular base, because I know that base.
Would you repeat the name of the base? Because I think the internet cut out there for a second.
Worcester in South Africa.
Worcester.
Worcester. Worcester, that's a place, that's a city.
Okay.
And it's close to Cape Town. And that's a good base. So I would be cautious in sending them just anywhere because it's YWAM. I would definitely find out where is it. And then I would also put time frames on it and say, hey, great, but let's then have feedback, after that time of discipleship training is actually coming to an end. I think the teaching has become somewhat more healthy. I think some of the early teachings of moral government and revivalism, I think that's gone. Although depending on where they are, because once again, some of the influences are strongly from Bethel and IHOP and all that. And I would not encourage that particularly, because that's not where I personally am at. And I think there's, the theology I don't endorse. But again, when people are grown up, they can make decisions themselves.
Right, yeah. What I like to tell people is to educate themselves before they go on what healthy leadership should look like, what control is. Because at the end of the day, you were saying it right in the beginning of our conversation, and it's basically like, yep, so we covered that. It's all control. They're trying to control you. If you can pick up on that, then you can clearly say, like for instance, the story comes to mind where someone was supposed to forgive. It was the evening where everybody was supposed to forgive, but that person was not ready to forgive. And so they were honest about that. And then they were consequentially kicked out. They had to go back home, money gone. And so that is what I like to tell people. Just do not let anyone control you. Be honest. Don't be rebellious, like outright, nasty or whatever, that means. But be truthful to what you sense inside and your love of God, however that expresses through you, and then see what happens. Because it's very likely that when you're around unhealthy people, they'll make sure that your life becomes miserable until you either leave on your own terms or they kick you out. And that's your experience, then I guess that was that.
That's very good. That's very good. I would totally amen that. And once again, I would say, it's something that you have to be cautious. You have to know. I've heard some real horror stories. I've heard really good stories, and it all depends what environment you come into and what kind of a base it is. And as a parent, I would definitely do some research as to, what am I sending my child to.
Oh, Peter, it has been so wonderful to talk with you.
You're very...
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your life, sharing of yourself. I mean, I don't know what evangelism is if not that, sharing your hopeful thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I love doing it. And if anybody has any questions, they're very welcome to connect with me, contact me. And
your email address, I'll put it in the description, then people can email you.
Absolutely.
You will get emails. Yeah.
No problem. Yeah. We can do that.
All right. Thank you, Peter. And I'm looking forward to talking to you again. Maybe in German next time.
Das wäre wunderbar. Natürlich.
Ja, sehr gerne. Okay, super. Well, thank you and have a wonderful evening.